Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Elizabeth Gareb, and I'm the Executive Director of the WPI. Today, I'm delighted to welcome the author Flavie Durand-Ruel, who will be speaking about the great Impressionist artist Pierre-Auguste Renoir and his important relationship with the art dealer Paul Durand-Ruel. We have the good fortune of presenting this webinar today, February 25th, on what would have been Renoir's 184th birthday. We also are celebrating our recent release of the digital catalog raisonné of Renoir's still lives, part of our ongoing catalog raisonné project on the artist's production. We do encourage all of you to explore this new digital catalog raisonné, which is accessible for free on our website, wpi.art, and we'll continue to expand it over time. Now I'd like to turn our attention to today's main event and welcome Flavie. Flavie Durand-Ruel has devoted herself to studying the fascinating life of her great-great-grandfather, Paul Durand-Ruel, a visionary and innovative contemporary art dealer. With her uncle, Paul-Louis Durand-Ruel, Flavie published the memoirs of their ancestor with Flammarion in 2014 and 2024. Together with Caroline Durand-Ruel Godefroy, they studied the correspondence of Durand-Ruel father and sons and artists such as Monet and Cassatt. As managing director of the Durand-Ruel Archives in Paris from 2006 until 2017, and of FDR Fine Arts in Brussels since 2018, Flavie carries out provenance research on works by the École de Barbizon, the Impressionists and the Post-Impressionists, and she's also working on the catalogue raisonné on the artist Albert André, who was a friend of Renoir. Flavie is joining us today from the archives of Durand-Ruel in Paris, and we are very pleased to have her deliver this presentation. Before I turn the screen over to Flavie, I'd just like to remind everyone that we're going to be having time at the end of Flavie's presentation for a brief question and answer section period from the audience. So please write your questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. So without further ado, I'll turn the screen over to Flavie. Flavie, thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for this introduction. Thank you all to be behind your computers. And I hope you will enjoy this presentation on Paul Durand-Ruel and Renoir. From the moment they met in the aftermath of the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, when Renoir was barely 30 years old and Paul Durand-Ruel almost 40, a great friendship was born and gradually established. Paul Durand-Ruel believed in Renoir and would purchase 1,210 pictures by Renoir between 1872 and 1919. Paul Durand-Ruel was a visionary figure in the history of art, both for his talent in discovering and championing young artists, and for the way he redefined the role of the professional art dealer. He discovered the business with his parents, Jean Durand and Marie Ruel, who had transformed a stationery shop into a renowned art gallery. Together, they fell in love and united their names, as you can see here on their label, Durand-Ruel. On this label, you can also see that not only did they sell pictures, they also rented them out, vente et location. And the rental cost varied for a period of 1 month between 3% of the value of the painting for the less important paintings to 8% for the larger formats. And at the time, it was more lucrative to rent than to sell pictures. Paul Durand-Ruel followed this practice and established some exceptionally innovative principles when he took over the business from his parents in 1865. The exclusivity of the artist's production. He organized individual and group exhibitions at a time when only official salons exhibited an enormous amount of artists whose pictures were hung from right to left and top to bottom. He also created a network of international galleries, associated the art world to the finance world, promote the artist via the press, gave free access to his galleries and to his apartment in Paris, and protected the art above all else. Regardless of political ideas or religious beliefs, art was above all. In addition to these principles, Durand-Ruel also favored a lighter hanging style and deposited pictures to take part in secessions or international exhibitions, and also organized traveling exhibitions. You see him here on a portrait by Hugues Merle, rather classic and chic, quite in the style of the pictures which were at the time appreciated. How did Durand-Ruel meet the Impressionists? It was in the early 1870s. Paul Durand-Ruel had taken refuge in London with his family during the Franco-Prussian War. He opened a gallery on New Bond Street in 1870, and this gallery enabled him to exhibit the pictures of the artists from the École de Barbizon, whom he had long supported, such as Théodore Rousseau, Jules Dupré, Jean-François Millet, Jean-Baptiste Corot, as well as young artists he then met in London. It was during a morning of 1871 that Charles-François d'Aubigny introduced an artist to Durand-Ruel, stating, "Here is an artist who will be greater than us all." This artist was Monet. Few days later, by pure coincidence, Pissarro left 2 pictures at the gallery of Durand-Ruel when the dealer was not present, and Durand-Ruel discovered the pictures and immediately exhibited them in his London gallery. Thus, between 1870 and 1875, Paul Durand-Ruel organized 11 exhibitions in his London gallery. When Renoir and the dealer Paul Durand-Ruel first met in 1872, he immediately bought the pictures of Renoir. This one is the first purchased picture from Renoir by Durand-Ruel, Le Pont des Arts, today in the Norton Simon Museum in Pasadena, Los Angeles. And in the winter of 1872, right after buying this picture, Durand-Ruel exhibited it in his 5th London show. Durand-Ruel admired Renoir's painting and strove to defend it. His policy as a dealer, based on the promotion of Renoir's work through his international network of galleries, encountered countless difficulties for over 20 years before the artist's work was finally appreciated. Despite the obstacles, as you will discover, the trust between artist and dealer persisted. In addition to Paris and London, Paul Durand-Ruel promoted the works of the artist, including Renoir, in Belgium. On this publicity of the time, you recognize the Durand-Ruel label, and you have the addresses of the 3 galleries. The Paris Gallery, 16 Rue Lafitte and 11 Rue Le Pelletier, the same space but with 2 entrances, the London address on New Bond Street, and the Brussels Gallery, Rue du Percy. Finally, with the signing of the armistice, after the Franco-Prussian War was finished, Durand-Ruel and family returned to Paris. That's when my great-great-grandfather suffered a terrible loss. An evening returning from the opera, his wife, Eva, caught a cold. She was barely 30 years old and pregnant of their 6th child, that she died of a pulmonary embolism. Paul Durand-Ruel remained the only parent of a family of 5 children, whose eldest child was close to 9 years old and the youngest 1 year old. Paul Durand-Ruel did not remarry and devoted himself even more to the art and artists he defended and liked. In 1873, the Impressionist group was completed, ready to be launched by their fervent defender, Paul Durand-Ruel, who had just won a major battle, as the painting by the artists of the Barbizon School were finally being accepted and appreciated. And over the next 20 years, Durand-Ruel promoted Renoir and his Impressionist friends and went through 2 financial crises. Having succeeded in imposing the painters of the Barbizon School to his clientele, he wanted to bring the contemporary artists to light. And this was a risky move, as his clientele was not sufficiently prepared to understand and acquire this new generation of artists. Clients were few and far between, and the mere association of Durand-Ruel name with the Impressionist painters was damaging to the reputation of the great art dealer he had become. Durand-Ruel entered in a terrible, difficult period in 1874 and was forced to abandon financially the Impressionist artists. It was actually at that time that the Impressionists organized their first exhibition in 1874. So it was his first crisis, and as he recalled in his memoir, it took me many years to recover from this new shock. To be able to repay what I owed, I subsist. I had to make money out of everything. Determined to cut my expenses, I sublet my apartment on Boulevard de la Madeleine in Paris, and even part of my galleries on Rue Lafitte. I also sought to borrow against my paintings. Only one person agreed to give me advances on the prices of the frames, not on the value of the paintings, which counted for nothing. Just to give you an idea. In Paris, at this time, Paul Durand-Ruel was financially exhausted, and the young group of artists formed an anonymous society, Société Anonyme, and organized their first exhibition in the atelier of the photographer Nadar. Renoir exhibited 6 paintings and 1 pastel. As you know, the event was very poorly received by the public, who dismissed the works as the work of mad people. However, thanks to the 1874 exhibition, the group of artists became known as the Impressionists, according to the negative and mocking article written by Louis Leroy in the press about a work by Claude Monet, which you all know, Impression Sunrise, which is now in the Musée Marmottan-Monet. And as you know, last year was the 150th anniversary of Impressionism, and many exhibitions worldwide celebrated that movement. And there was also an inclusive, immersive video or film in which you could enter the Nadar exhibition. Despite the French press outburst against the Impressionists, Paul Durand-Ruel believed in their talent and continued to exhibit them. And in 1876, he organized the second Impressionist exhibition, which was poorly received and were the following ones. As he recalls in his memoirs, "As for me," so it's Durand-Ruel writing, "guilty of having presented and dared to defend such works, I was called a fool and a man of bad faith. Little by little, the trust I had managed to inspire disappeared, and I became suspect to my best clients. How can you," they said, "after having been one of the first to love the Barbizon school, now praise us for paintings in which there is not a shred of quality?" Durand-Ruel continues and says, "I was repeatedly told that I would end my days in Charenton. And Charenton was at the time a house for the mentally ill. During that exhibition, you could see gorgeous pictures such as this one, rather classic, a portrait of Mademoiselle Legrand, side by side with a nude torso by Renoir. And the painting by Renoir were quite shocking for the public of the time. And please come in. And as the critics said at the time, they compared the nude of Renoir to the putrefaction of a corpse and compared the colors to the purplish tones of rancid meat. They actually did not understand what Renoir was trying to do, which was painting time and light. And so the sun rays going through the foliages brought such colors of purple, brown, green, and blue on the corpse of this nude woman. To give you a better idea of the art critics of the time, here's a caricature by Cham, which appeared in Charivari in 1877 during the third Impressionist exhibitions, illustrating a policeman blocking the way of a pregnant woman about to enter the exhibition of Impressionist painters and shouting, "Madame, it wouldn't be prudent, withdraw." At this time, in 1880, when Paul Durand-Ruel was on the verge of ruin, he met Gilles Feder, director of the Banque Union Générale, whose support enabled him to resume his excessive purchasing policy and pay a monthly stipend to his artists, such as Monet, Renoir, and Sisley, and Pissarro. One of the dealer's highly innovative principles was to support artists monthly, and morally, of course, but financially, so that they could create without the worry of finance. In exchange, Paul Durand-Ruel could obtain the paintings as soon as they were created. In their relationship, as confirmed by the letters, both Renoir and Durand-Ruel were sincere and honest. Renoir remained modest and respectful, and Paul Durand-Ruel knew this. That's why when Renoir wrote to his dealer and asked him 200 to 500 francs, Durand-Ruel did not hesitate, if he could, and to send him the maximum amount of money requested by Renoir. However, 2 years later, in 1882, the Bank of l'Union Générale collapsed, catastrophe for Paul Durand-Ruel, who was forced to reimburse and pay back the sum he had borrowed to the bank. Even though he was in debt, he continued to support morally the artists and asked Renoir to do the portrait of his family, of his 5 children. And here you see Joseph Durand-Ruel, who is the eldest son of Paul and who has a canvas for himself. And here you have Charles and Georges, the 2 brothers who have to share the canvas. Again, here it's really the instant that Renoir wants to capture and to paint. And you see, for example, even one of the 2 brothers smoking a cigarette, and it's a little bit of a red light. So it's really the instant, the light, and all the colors which are of the nature and of that nature, thanks to the light, reflecting on both their costumes. As well, the 2 sisters had to share a canvas, as you can see here, Marie and Jeanne. And again, their dresses, which is supposed to be white, are completely covered by colors such as blue, green, purple, which are the colors again of light going through the foliage around the 2 sisters. This picture is now in the Chrysler Museum of Art in Norfolk, Virginia. At the same time, Paul Durand-Ruel also commissioned Monet to decorate the door panels of his apartment in Paris, situated 35 Rue de Rome, near the Gare Saint-Lazare. And on that photograph of Paul Durand-Ruel's main salon, you see 2 beautiful pictures by Renoir and those beautiful door panels by Monet, who took more than 3 years to paint them. Again, on that photograph of the other side of the salon, you see other door panels by Monet, sorry, here and here, a beautiful Dance in the City by Renoir. You also have a beautiful marble by Rodin, 2 beautiful pastels by Degas on either side of the mirror. Again, as decorative art, you have the panel in front of the fireplace decorated by John Louis Brown. And here, please believe me, is a beautiful picture by Cassatt. In 1883, throughout 1883, Paul Durand-Ruel organized a successive series of solo exhibitions of the work of Impressionist artists. Durand-Ruel believed that with the solo exhibitions, the public was able to better understand the pictures of an artist. And here you have 2 catalogs, one of Monet and one of Renoir, in 1883, when Durand-Ruel organized an exhibition of Buddha in February, Monet in March, Renoir in April, Pissarro in May, Sisley in June. And for the Durand-Ruel exhibition around Renoir, he exhibited 70 pictures during that exhibition of 1883, including this beautiful portrait of Mademoiselle Marie Durand-Ruel, today at the Sterling and Francine Clark Art Institute in Williamston. That year, in 1883, Durand-Ruel wrote to Pissarro, "We must try to revolutionize the new world at the same time as the old." Thus, he organized, in addition to this series of exhibitions in Paris, he sent a great deal of pictures, 80 paintings to Boston for an exhibition there, and he also continued his exhibitions in Europe. He sent 99 pictures to London, including 15 Renoir to the gallery Durand-Ruel and Durand-Ruel. He also sent 24 pictures, including 3 Renoir, to Berlin at the Fritz Gerlit Gallery in Berlin. And despite all these exhibitions, the success was quite little, and the exhibitions were not appreciated or welcomed, and Durand-Ruel didn't sell many pictures. Despite the difficulties, Paul Durand-Ruel remained close to his artist, and the most loyal of them was Renoir, as their letters testify. Let me check the letter I would like to quote. It's Renoir who writes to Durand-Ruel during the darkest moments of Durand-Ruel. Renoir suggests to the dealer to even reduce the prices of the pictures he makes in order to sell them. And he says, as for the paintings, if you're obliged to make sacrifices, don't regret it, because I will make you new ones and better ones. And again, the support of the artist was full when Durand-Ruel was falsely accused in a counterfeiting case for which he was not responsible. The dealer decided to defend himself and to write an article in the newspaper stating how he defended his artist. So Durand-Ruel writes in 1885 in the newspaper, I come to my great crime. I have long bought and held in the highest esteem the works of highly original and learned painters, many of whom are men of genius, and I claim to impose them on amateurs. I believe that pictures by the Impressionists are worthy of the best collections. And when Durand-Ruel writes this in the Événement, Renoir will send him a very, very nice and enthusiastic letters and says, no matter how hard they try, they will not kill your true quality, the love of art, and the defense of artists before their death. In the future, this will be your glory, for you are the only one who has thought of this natural thing. And you see here a portrait of Renoir by Albert André, who was a very close friend of Renoir and who depicts him very strong with his eyes pétillants, as we say in French. It was then that Durand-Ruel was again close to bankruptcy in 1885 when an American, James Sutton, who was the director of the American Association of New York and who had discovered the pictures of the Impressionists both in the gallery of Paul Durand-Ruel as well as in his apartment, and invited Paul Durand-Ruel to organize an exhibition in New York in 1886. For Durand-Ruel, that was really the last chance as he saw it. And he could organize it because the American Art Association paid for all the transport, the promotion, the entry within the United States, and all other cost-related issues. And Durand-Ruel accepted the invitation. Some artists refused and were panicked to see their pictures leave for the country of the Yankees, as Monet said at the time. But the artist Mary Cassatt, who was the only American artist of the Impressionist group, shared the same aesthetic values than Paul Durand-Ruel and helped him. And in 2026, we will be celebrating the 100th anniversary of Mary Cassatt's death. And my uncle Paul Durand-Ruel, my aunt Caroline Durand-Ruel Godefroy, and I are presently working on Cassatt's correspondence, which we intend to publish for the Orsay exhibition of Cassatt, organized by Anne Robbins, and among other people. And we'll be happy to publish it with Flammarion and Julie Rouard. So keep in touch on Cassatt. Cassatt is not only an amazing artist, she comes from a rich family, American family, and knows all the newly constituted fortune in America. And she will present these people to Paul Durand-Ruel in 1886 in New York during that exhibition. And you see here a beautiful portrait of Marie Durand-Ruel and her two daughters. Paul Durand-Ruel entrusted responsibility for the Paris gallery to his eldest son, Joseph, aged 24, and left for New York with his second son, Charles, aged 20, and brought with him 43 crates containing close to 300 paintings, including 38 by Renoir. And you have to understand that at the time, you have to take a boat. It takes more than 3 weeks. And upon arrival in New York, one anecdote recounts that Renoir's nudes, such as this one, for example, were not well received by the puritanical American custom officials. Paul Durand-Ruel, who wanted to exhibit them at all costs, spotted the parish of the custom director, who was an Irish Catholic, attended Mass the very next day, and was able to convince him to allow entry to these pictures. The exhibition of 1886 in New York was a great success. And you see on the title of the catalog, works in oil and pastel by the Impressionists of Paris. And for the first time, journalists wrote very enthusiastic articles and defended Paul Durand-Ruel as being one of the most fervent defenders of the Impressionists. Some collectors started to buy pictures, such as Mr. Kingman, who purchased, among others, 4 paintings by Renoir, all of which were flowers, or another great collector, Mr. Spencer, who bought paintings by Renoir during the 1886 exhibition. Great collectors such as Vermeer, the Kingman, the Spencer, and others came out and enjoyed these pictures. They trusted Paul Durand-Ruel, who had been the defender of the Barbizon School already in America and had sold pictures by these artists. And so the American trusted him for his eye and believed that the new artists he was showing them could be good. And they started to buy them at low prices. The exhibition was a first official recognition of Renoir and the Impressionists, and it had so much success it was prolongated. And in this prolongation, there were an addition of close to 10 pictures, including dance in the city and dance in the country, which were just before exhibited in Brussels at the Salon des Vins. And you see here the 2 beautiful pictures, which were exhibited also in 1886 in New York. And trusted by the American reception, Paul Durand-Ruel decided to organize another exhibition the next year. However, the American dealers posed difficulties for the French dealer, and American customs demanded a tax of more than 30% of value of the paintings in order to import them in the United States. Nevertheless, Durand-Ruel found solutions and opened a gallery in New York the next year in 1888. And from then on, Renoir's paintings were exhibited regularly both in the Paris gallery as well as in the New York gallery. And between 1890 and 1893, thanks to the American recognition, the Parisian gallery business picked up, Monet's success was confirmed, and Renoir and Pissarro were recognized. Now let us describe the 2 men, Paul Durand-Ruel and Renoir. Their characters were made for each other. At the Renoir exhibition organized in May 1892 by the Durand-Ruel Paris Gallery, in which showed 110 works by Renoir, Arsène Alexandre wrote the preface of the catalogue, describing the artist in these words. Renoir is modest, tender, and a perpetual seeker. He's a great artist, this painter, so long despised without him conceiving the slightest bitterness, more occupied as he was with his own anxiety than with people's injustice. And the same art critic will later describe and write about Paul Durand-Ruel in 1911, and he will describe the dealer in such words. First of all, Durand-Ruel is simplicity itself. Not one is more adorable than the great Parisian notoriety. He can be found by anyone at any time of day. Gentle and courteous manners. From these 2 quotations from Arsène Alexandre, who described the 2 characters as men of integrity, welcoming, easygoing, and warm-hearted, it seems so natural that the 2 men liked each other from the moment they met until the end of their lives. This friendship and complicity were sincere. Artist and dealer could always count on each other's support, artist to dealer and dealer to artist. Finally, Paul Durand-Ruel, who had established himself in the United States, also forged ties in Europe to continue promoting Renoir's work among other artists. For example, in Germany, in 1896 onwards, Dr. Hugo von Tschudi, curator and director of the Berlin Museum and later the Munich Museum, made several visits to the Paris Gallery, and together, Durand-Ruel and Tschudi provided German Museum with the opportunity to acquire masterpieces. And to prove this very long friendship and productive, when Tschudi died in 1911, and in memory of Dr. Tschudi, Durand-Ruel offered to the Munich Museum a picture by Renoir, portrait of M. Bernard. Durand-Ruel also worked with Paul and Bruno Cassirer, Both Berlin art dealers at the time, and I would like to quote again a quotation. When Paul Durand-Ruel wrote to Gustave Pauly, then curator of the Bremen Museum, and he wrote to Pauly, so Durand-Ruel to Pauly, it would be preferable to come to an agreement with Monsieur Paul Cassirer concerning the Renoir and Pissarro paintings you will like to exhibit. Mr. Cassirer deals exclusively with our paintings for the whole of Germany. At the moment, he has organized a very important exhibition of Renoir's work in Berlin, where you will undoubtedly be able to choose the painting you would like to exhibit. Thus, between 1890 and 1914, Durand-Ruel exhibited in more than 10 German cities, marking the origin of Impressionism in the collections in Germany. In Vienna, during the secession of 1903, Durand-Ruel also sent 33 paintings to Austria, including the portrait of Jeanne Durand-Ruel, now in the collection of the Barnes Foundation in Philadelphia. In Vienna, Durand-Ruel also benefited from the ties he had forged with the gallery owner Mietke. And among other things, Durand-Ruel sent him 24 pictures, including six Renoirs, for his exhibitions in 1911. And again in 1913, he sent 24 pictures, including 10 Renoirs, to Mietke in Australia. However, and thanks to all these international exhibitions, Renoir's paintings were more and more appreciated, and the very first Renoir to enter a French museum was in 1901, this gorgeous picture representing women playing guitars, which is now in the Musée de Lyon. And it was a picture sold directly by Renoir to the museum, but thanks to Durand-Ruel, who told the Renoir to sell it directly from him so that the museum wouldn't be suspicious to buy it from a dealer. And here you have the genius of Renoir with the reds, the whites, the colors he uses, and the expression, the instant. He's just a magician. We could almost hear the woman playing guitar. In Great Britain, as you can see on this cover catalog, Monsieur Durand-Ruel, and if you read closely to the screen, you will read Monsieur Durand-Ruel's and Sons of Paris. And this exhibition is an exhibition organized by the two generations of the Durand-Ruel dealers in London in 1905. It includes more than 300 pictures by Boudin, Manet, Pissarro, Cézanne, Monet, Renoir, Degas, Morisot, and Sisley. This magnificent shows, which remains today the finest Impressionist exhibition to ever have been organized, both of the 20th and the 21st centuries, not only for the quality of the works of art presented, but also for the sheer number of paintings on display. And during this exhibition, among the 58 pictures by Renoir listed in the exhibition catalogue, visitors in London could admire such great masterpieces as Luncheon of the Boating Party, which you see on this photograph on the far left. You also have other, so here's the Luncheon of the Boating Party, but you also have here La Femme au Chat, which is today the Barnes collection in Philadelphia, and you have many other masterpieces. So here, in addition to Germany, Austria, and Great Britain, Paul Durand-Ruel also promoted the work of Renoir and the Impressionists throughout the world, in Belgium, in Italy, Spain, Holland, Sweden, Russia, Argentina, and of course in the United States. And it is thanks to these exhibitions that little by little, Renoir's picture earned recognition and could be sold at higher prices. To give you an idea, in 1908, Durand-Ruel sold Renoir's small still lifes pictures between 700 to 2,000 French francs of the time. For landscapes, he sold pictures between 6,000 French francs for small formats to 12,000 French francs for larger formats. And one of the most exceptional amounts paid for a picture by Renoir in 1908 was 40,000 French francs for a magnificent painting, Femme à l'éventail, which you see on your screen, sold to Ivan Morozov, a client of Durand-Ruel. Morozov and Choukin were two families who were close to Durand-Ruel, and Durand-Ruel sold them many pictures and many masterpieces. Finally, Renoir's move to Les Colettes in the south of France in the autumn of 1908 was one of the symbols of his success, which seems to have brought him the serenity his dealer had hoped for. The benefits of the south of France, where the artist had already been living for several years, seemed ideal for Renoir, both in terms of his health and his artistic creation. And Durand-Ruel wrote to him a nice letter in 1908. And I'm going to read you the quote. "I'm happy to see you in such good health. You are blessed with superb weather, and I congratulate you on being in a country so different from our ugly Paris. It helps a lot to bear the winter and saves you a lot of pain and trouble. What's more, you have light, whereas here it's totally lacking, and you'd find it hard to work." During one of their many visits of Durand-Ruel's family at the Colette, in the house and garden of Renoir, Joseph Durand-Ruel took this picture of Coco in the trees. Also, the same year, in 1910, Renoir immortalized his friend and dealer Paul Durand-Ruel by painting his portrait after more than 30 years of intense, sincere, and mutual friendship. In the years that followed, Renoir painted other family portraits, such as this gorgeous one, Génie Durand-Ruel, the wife of Joseph Durand-Ruel. And you see here on the photograph Renoir, the portrait of Mrs. Joseph Durand-Ruel, and Mrs. Joseph Durand-Ruel posing in the house of Saint-Cloud. The families of the artists and of the family were so close that Renoir chose Georges Durand-Ruel, the second son of Paul, as godfather to his son Jean Renoir, the future great film director. Durand-Ruel, father and son, continued to promote Renoir exhibiting his works at 83 times, including 26 solo exhibitions and 45 group shows. And finally, in 1920, a year after Renoir's death, Durand-Ruel organized a great exhibition in his Paris galleries to honor the artist. And Paul Durand-Ruel was 89 years old when he recalled that at last the Impressionist artists were triumphing, such as those of the École de Barbizon had been triumphing. My folly and madness had become wisdom. To think that had I died at 60 years old, I would have died completely riddled with debt and insolvent among unknown treasures. That same year, in 1920, Durand-Ruel was awarded the Légion d'honneur, but ironically, not for the fine arts, but for the foreign trade. During Durand-Ruel's most successful years, between 1891 and 1922, the year of his death, Durand-Ruel purchased close to 12,000 pictures, including 1,210 by Renoir. In 1922, one of the great art critics of the time, Théodore Duret, wrote to Paul Durand-Ruel's son in February 1922. Let me read you the last quote I would like to read, if I can find it. I have just learned from your father's death. I don't need to tell you how deeply saddened I am. I spent part of my life beside him, and I can say that he was a man of intelligence, a man of courage, to whom French art and artists owe an immense gratitude. Without him, what would have become of Manet, Monet, and Renoir in their early days? Well, I thank you very much for all your attention, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Flavie. That was fascinating. I'm sure we will have a lot of questions, so those of you who do, please write them in our Q&A. I would just like to start out, Flavie, by an observation and a question. The Durand-Ruel archives are so exceptionally rich with information. It's extraordinary for you to be able to tell these stories with such detail. I particularly love the anecdote of, going to mass in New York to try to cozy up to the Catholic Customs Authority to get the paintings in. I'm wondering, the breadth and depth of the Durand-Ruel archive is so helpful, not only for the study of the Durand-Ruel gallery history, but I would imagine for the study of Impressionism at large. Can you talk a little bit about how you make these resources available to scholars and researchers today?
Yes, of course. So in the Durand-Ruel archives today, Paul Durand-Ruel, sorry, Paul Louis Durand-Ruel, my uncle, together also sometimes with Claire Durand-Ruel or my aunt Caroline Durand-Ruel Godefroy, both specialists, Claire on Pissarro and Caroline on Maufra, and we study very deeply the archives, and unfortunately, the archives are not open to the public, but we try to answer to all the questions we receive, whether it be from auction houses, students, university students, researchers, of course, museums, um, researchers as well as from the WPI
Hmm.
Institute. But
Of
we're
course.
very welcoming all the questions you may have. Please do send us an email and we'll do the research. Basically, primarily my uncle and we'll try to find as much information as possible. But it's true that we have stock books, we have deposit books, we have many letters, correspondence between Durand-Ruel New York and Durand-Ruel Paris, where we can find details. And that's quite interesting and exciting to do this research. We're happy to help whenever we can.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, well, we have some questions. One of them is from Brittany Luberda. She writes, beyond the beautiful Monet door panels for the gallery, are you familiar with any decorative arts or architectural commissions by or sold by Durand-Ruel?
Well, so the door panels by Monet were not for the gallery, they were for the apartment of Paul Durand-Ruel. You have to think about something quite amazing, is that the boating lunch by Renoir, the huge pictures, was actually a painting which was in the dining room of Paul Durand-Ruel all his life until 1922. Other decorations, panels can be seen more with the post-impressionism as well. So that is Georges d'Espagna, Albert André, and who did also door panels. But I'm not sure really how many were sold or not, because basically these door panels were kept in the collection until quite late. Some of them were sold, but they were actually painted as pictures. So they were painted on normal spreadshirt and then put on
Mhm.
the door. So they were actually full paintings.
Right,
And
they were on canvas for sure.
yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And they were quite hard for Monet to paint because it took him 3 years to paint them because of the various format you have. But I recall that Paul Durand-Ruel says in one of his letters, he says, please, please, Monet, finish them. For me, it's so much more powerful to exhibit you in my apartment on the doors than to exhibit you in my gallery. We'll try to convince collectors to purchase them. But I'm not, to answer precisely the question, I'm not sure exactly how many decorations were made. By Monet, of course, I do. We wrote an article in that great book. There's an article about the decorations.
Right. There, another question about the door panels was asking where they are today. And I know that I have seen some come up on the market fairly recently and repeatedly. So you can find them out in the world today.
Yes.
Right. Another question. Let me see. This is an anonymous question. Did Durand-Ruel encourage Renoir to make more landscapes compared to portraits? In general, did Durand-Ruel find it easier to sell a particular type of painting?
Well, interestingly enough, I think that question comes from someone who read the correspondence between Monet and Durand-Ruel, and who sometimes says Durand-Ruel. So I'm going on to Monet, not Renoir, but Durand writes to Monet and said, please make your pictures not too big and please finish them. Because American collectors like pictures which are completely finished. Because as you know, Monet painted outdoors, on many canvases at the same time, according to the weather, and he would finish them in his studio. That's when Durand-Ruel said, please finish well your pictures. So yes, Durand-Ruel advised Renoir and Monet and others sometimes, but in other letters, for example, with Boudin, he says, please do whatever you want. I trust what you will create and follow your inspiration. So there's a mix. Sometimes he does advise when he knows that some clients are looking for a certain kind of well-finished, smaller format. But that's not always the case.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Um, Here is one question from actually it's somewhat similar from Virginia Reguan, and I think it's kind of a repeat. Did Durand-Ruel ever suggest specific subjects for Renoir and other artists? It sounds like he didn't really interfere, other than to say, please finish.
Except that, of course, he did ask Renoir. Renoir was the only person to whom Durand-Ruel asked the portrait of his children. He also asked Cassatt, but he never asked the others. And we all know that Renoir is a great painter for portraits and for women and nudes, while Monet is more a landscaper. So probably they had oral conversation. There's little information in the correspondence, but you can read this, the correspondence between Renoir and Durand-Ruel, and you'll have some clue sometimes here and there on how he advises the artists. But pretty much
Okay.
advise them for the best of themselves. He wants to advise them, but he believes in them, so he lets them rather free most of the time.
Okay, great. Here's a question from Cindy Kang. What did Durand-Ruel think of Renoir's late work as opposed to his earlier Impressionist work?
Well, in the later part of his life, Renoir came back to more what we call an Ingres style. So it's more like wine line of drawings are more defined and precise. And Durand-Ruel liked that way that Renoir painted because it was kind of returning to the beginning, kind of to the very classic. And Renoir was a grown man, as we can say, was a genius because it was towards the end of his life that he painted this gorgeous picture that I invite you all to go and see in the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which is the Great Bathers, which are
Mhm.
typical of that Ingres styles painted at the end of the life of Renoir. And you will feel that when you're standing in front of that picture, that it's a super young artist who painted this huge canvas with so much energy. So I believe, yes, that Durand-Ruel liked that period as well.
Okay, here's a question. It's very specific. Let's see if you can tap the lexicon of information immediately. This is coming from Lori Garst at the Biltmore Estate. We have 3 Renoirs purchased from Durand-Ruel in February 9th, 1892. Was this during the 1892 New York exhibition?
So indeed, Biltmore has amazing pictures by Renoir. So again, go and see them as well. It's the 1892 exhibition. I have to double check, but I think it was in May, and that purchase was in February. But I have to double check. I'd be happy to double check with for you.
Okay. Here's a question from Andrew Bonnycastle. Was there difficulty between Renoir and Degas later in life, with Degas becoming increasingly challenging as an individual? Do you know about that?
I don't know what Renoir and Degas' relationships were. The only thing I know is that Renoir was such an accommodating person that he didn't like conflicts and always try to be nice and sweet or whatever or comprehensible to others. I have no clue what Degas and Renoir may have said at the end of their lives. I mean, Degas was a complete different character, quite hard. I think he wanted to distance himself from others by being so hard. And we have little correspondence with Degas because Degas lived in Paris as well as Durand-Ruel. So there were a lot of exchanges which were verbal and not written. But Degas was quite a character. They're quite opposed. I mean, Degas and Renoir are two opposed characters.
Right. Thank you. Here's a question. It's very specific, but maybe we can frame it in a more general way. Dominique de Guerre writes, "What happened with your family, Durand-Ruel's collection of impressionists during World War II?" I guess that poses another question for me: is how did the Durand-Ruel Gallery safeguard the pictures during the Second World War?
Well, it's a super interesting question because
Hmm.
we can even speak about the two world wars. But during the Second World Wars, most of the pictures were hidden in a family property outside
Hmm.
France. And Durand-Ruel seized Impressionist exhibitions, but the gallery yet organized few exhibitions of post-Impressionist artists, which were really not as well known and not well appreciated, such as Albert André, Gustave Loiseau, Georges Espagna, or Henri Moret. So basically, the family saved and put away the Impressionist pictures they had from their own collection, as well as from collections of their friends and collectors and clients. That's how
Hmm.
they went through the Second World War. And during the First World War, there was another story because Durand-Ruel had sent more than 100 pictures to Cassirer in Berlin. And
Hmm.
during that war, after, of course, well, not of course, but the 100 pictures sent to Cassirer disappeared during the war. And
Hmm.
after war, they were considered as a damage war. How do you say? Uh, war damage. And
Hmm.
Durand was reimbursed by the German state, but at a ridiculous value. Not only
Mm.
the money, the German money was very low, but also because the value of the pictures were not considered masterpieces at all. Well, they were actually. So wars are always quite difficult and difficult periods to go through, but Durand always tried to protect the art as much as possible.
Given that Durand-Ruel had an outpost in New York, were some of the pictures sent to the United States for safekeeping once things started to heat up in Europe?
So that's a great question. So Durand-Ruel the Durand-Ruel New York office closed in 1949. So during the Second World War,
Hmm.
it was open. The New York Gallery was open, but the
Hmm.
customs were closed
Hmm.
quite fast or for a certain amount of time between France and America. And even
Hmm.
if the American branch of the Durand-Ruel Gallery sold pictures, they couldn't send the money back to France. But what's so interesting also is when we publish next year Cassatt's correspondence, I wish and I hope that will be interesting to you all. You will see that Cassatt asked Durand-Ruel to send her pictures to New York to be safe during that war.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
Durand says, we cannot do so because it's going to take them too long for them to arrive in Paris. And then there are too many, not customs, but too many checks
Mm.
to, to have from whom we need an okay. And so, no. So that's why most of them were just hidden in the countryside, but not
Interesting.
sent to New York.
Interesting. Here's a totally different question. This comes from an anonymous attendee. Are you planning on digitalizing the archives and making them available to researchers at any point?
So the archives are digitalized. We have them on computer and we work on computer like everybody does now. And they are open. As of now, we will not put them public for now on because we want to keep them alive and to interpret them, and because we need to make them more clear because it's, I mean, stock books, for example, change. Each time a stock book is finished, a second stock book comes up. And maybe the column will not show the same position. Maybe the information will not be shown in the same way. Sometimes there are coded prices. Sometimes there are information which is, how do you say, barré.
Hmm. Prohibited, right? Hmm.
Not prohibited, but for example, in stock books, when a picture is
Hmm.
sold,
Hmm.
the line is crossed by
Yeah.
a, so
Yes.
you, you have to go back to the accounting book and then go back to
Hmm.
the books. It's more complicated than just putting them online and having them for free for researcher. But
Hmm.
we'll find solutions. And should researchers need information, please contact us.
Great. Here is a question from Natalie Zach. Did Durand-Ruel ever comment or speculate on why the early Impressionists appealed more to the New York audiences by the 1880s, leading to the invitation from the American Art Association of New York?
Hello, Natalie. I think I recognize you. So, um, basically, if I understand correctly the question, we have to put us back in the timeline of in the time of the time. In 1886, Americans were growing, fortunes were newly made. Durand-Ruel, already in the 1860s, had exhibited in New York, had exhibited in many countries in America, but did not open a gallery. But he felt that the growth was coming from America because
Mhm,
there were these new fortunes. For example, the brother of Mary Cassatt, Alexander Cassatt, was the seventh president of the Pennsylvania Railroad, the
mhm,
first most expensive company of the time. So these rich Americans not only had money, didn't have the chance, as in Europe, to have had the Italian Renaissance or the north of Europe, Flandre Renaissance. And so they were, in a way, positively uh, hungry to discover and support Impressionists, or at least painters or artists that were brought to them. And they wanted to have a philanthropist role, such as the Frick, Mr. and Mrs. Frick. And Durand-Ruel arrived with his pictures. He, in the 1886 exhibition, which what I didn't say, that there were other pictures than just the Impressionists, more
mhm,
classic, but they were amazingly contemporary pictures because there was a caillebotte, Les Raboteurs de Parquet, in 1886 exhibited in the
mhm,
New York exhibition. So
mhm,
yes, I think Durand-Ruel had hoped for these rich
mhm,
Americans to have a better look at these pictures. And
mhm.
no choice, because in Paris he was close to bankrupt. So that was a little bit the last chance.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we are just about out of time, and I want to thank you again so much, Flavie, for this wonderful presentation. It was so rich and detailed. I really appreciate it. And for those of you who are watching, again, you can contact Flavie and the Durand-Ruel Archives. We can perhaps put the website in our chat or online when we republish this webinar, which is being recorded and will be live, or not live, it's live right now. It will be recorded and accessible on our website and on YouTube. So please tune in and tell others who didn't see it to tune in through that means. And thank you again, Flavie. Thank you all for joining us today. And I wish you a lovely rest of your day. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye bye.